Hello and welcome to today's Tidings. I'm your host, Joyce Tumia. My guest today is Tana Tatnall, the Executive Director of Literacy DuPage, and we're going to start by letting her share some background information, and then maybe we'll have a definition of literacy. What would you like to share about your background information, how you came into this job, what got you interested in it, how long you've been doing it?
Well, I've been in the nonprofit or social sector world for about 12 years now. I actually started out as a volunteer, not for this organization, but I started out as a volunteer board member for United Way of Wheaton Carroll Stream. And then there became a very small executive director position opened up in West Chicago for United Way. And I was all of 17 hours a week, which then we decided to merge with Wheaton Carroll Stream, and it became 30 hours a week. And long story short, by the end of the first year that I was working as an executive director for United Way, we did all the mergers with United Way back in around 2003. And in 2004, I became the Chief Professional Officer for United Way of the DuPage area. And I'm telling you that because 3 years into it, we did a site visit with Literacy DuPage.
Okay.
And I have an education background. I taught elementary school, I taught middle school, and I just have a deep love for education, and I understand how important education is for every single person who lives in DuPage County and in the United States. And we all should have a right to education in the United States, which we do, but there are many people who come here who don't have really strong education backgrounds. So when we did the partner site visit with Literacy DuPage, I became very interested in the organization and what they were doing, and one of the main things I loved was that they were really producing results, and they had a good way to find out if they were producing results.
Measurable,
Measurable results, right? And I then found out about 2 or 3 weeks after we did the site review that their executive director of 16 years was retiring. So I applied for the job, and I've been with the organization for 6 years.
Wonderful.
So I did really start as a volunteer, and it led to other positions.
Wonderful. Okay, and it does sound as though you are very passionate about this. Now let's define literacy. I assume people know what that means, but on the other hand, it never hurts to define it just in case.
Yeah, you know, Joyce, that's a really great question because sometimes we look at people and we say, well, we need to be more literate, or you need to increase your literacy skills. And people don't quite know exactly what that means. But literacy really is the building block of all education, and it's pretty basic. It's about learning to read, it's about learning to write, it's about speaking, and it's about understanding English. It's also about math skills and critical thinking skills. That really is the basis for what literacy is all about.
Did you say math skills?
Well, part of literacy is about math skills. If you even think about if you go to the store and you're not able to understand if someone says it costs $5.50, that's a literacy skill, not just a math skill.
Interesting. Okay. Very interesting. And I know you mentioned something when we were chatting earlier too about people wanting medical information or wanting to know how to describe symptoms and so on. So really, literacy is the ability to communicate, and that means receive communication and understand it as well, whatever the topic, whether it's math or a health issue or something else.
Right.
Okay,
you
wonderful.
Absolutely have it.
Okay.
So to tell you a little bit about our program, we offer free one-on-one tutoring to adults who need to increase their English skills. That would be reading, writing, speaking, and understanding of English, and sometimes that does involve math skills as well.
Okay.
And what we do is we train volunteers to become tutors for the adult learners. And the adult learners in our program, typically about 85% want English as a second language. Another 15% want what we call adult basic literacy, which means that they read below a 9th grade level. And they also have poor writing skills usually. So their speaking is okay, but they need that reading and writing. And where our program comes in is we make it accessible for the adult learner. So, for example, if someone cannot get to College of DuPage to go to a class, they may be referred to our program. And we can then match them based on their own time schedule. So what's great is that, Joyce, if you wanted to be a tutor and you said, well, I can tutor at 10 o'clock Monday morning or 7 o'clock on Wednesday night, we probably have an adult learner who needs someone at 10 o'clock on Monday morning or 7 o'clock on Wednesday night, because what we do is we match up the schedules between the adult volunteer and the adult learner, and then we also match geographically. So if you want to tutor, say, at the Downers Grove Library, we would find an adult learner who could meet you at the Downers Grove Library. So we make it accessible. The second piece to our program is we customize it, and that's what you were talking about a moment ago.
Right, and you can explain that, but I want to backtrack a little bit and talk about the organization itself, because I understand it is celebrating a special anniversary.
It very much is. Our organization actually began by two women who met at Gary Methodist Church in Wheaton, and they then started the organization in December of 1972. So this is our 40th anniversary celebration.
Wonderful.
And we now serve, of course, the entire county and a few little surrounding areas as well. And it's just grown. The first year that they began the tutoring, I think they had just under 40 students. And we typically have between 550 and 600 adult learners that we are serving each year in our organization. And we do that with about 450 volunteers throughout the county. That is incredible.
And I understand that you have a waiting list of several hundred.
You're right. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to be on your show today, was to let people know of the need that we have for adult learners. We have about 200 adults who are waiting for a tutor, and we have another 100 who are waiting to be put on the waiting list.
Oh my gosh, which is really a second waiting list, a waiting list for the waiting list.
It is, right.
There is definitely a need.
There is a need. So, you know, in DuPage County, these may sound like really big numbers, but if you look at the last census, there are about 90,000 adults, residents in DuPage County who are limited with their English proficiency skills. There are another 55,000 who have less than a high school education, and many of them also would read below a 9th grade level. So there is a growing need in DuPage County. It's not getting less, it's actually growing all the time. Okay. And though we have wonderful places like a College of DuPage that offers the classroom, we know that because people have challenges with childcare, with transportation, and with work schedules, that's where our program comes in, and we're able to meet them where they can meet and on their own time schedule. And so that's how the program makes it accessible for those adult learners.
Okay, and I'm sure you get asked a lot of very basic questions because there are things people want to know. For instance, literacy doesn't deal just with people for whom English is a second language. That might be a high percentage of it, but it isn't just that. There are people who were born speaking English who, for whatever reason, dropped out of school early. Maybe they needed to, or for whatever reason, they did drop out of school early and maybe didn't learn as much English or learn as much vocabulary or whatever it is that would help them succeed in life doing day-to-day tasks like going to the bank or doing grocery shopping if they can't read or understand some of the terminology, explaining symptoms to a doctor. That was an example you brought up earlier, which is not necessarily just going to be an issue with people who don't speak English as a first language. So there are many areas in which it is very important, obviously, to be able to communicate and understand others trying to communicate with them.
Well, so, you're absolutely right. I mean, that 55,000 number, many of those are what we would call adult basic education learners who read below that 9th grade level. And the interesting thing about an adult basic education learner is that they've been able to hide the fact that they don't have good literacy skills.
And how do they do that?
Well, many of the ones that I've come in contact with, they put on a mask, and somehow they're able to compensate for it. And they tell you that they're able to compensate for it. You know, maybe they ask the person next to them, "Can you help me with this?" or something. And so they learn along the way to compensate for it. And many of them have jobs, but they might not have higher paying jobs because they're afraid that they might get found out, you might say. We had an adult learner who just was in our program this past year, whose name is Jim, and he wrote this beautiful story about how now he's able to lay down his mask because he was covering it up, because he moved around, so he didn't have a solid education foundation, and because he did get married and he has a family, but he said, "I couldn't even read to my children." He said, so I would always have their mother read to them. I couldn't do it. So that was a way of compensating. And one of the great things about the story he tells us now is he's able to read to his children, and he's so happy about that. And we find that a lot, especially with the students in our program who are from other countries. Many of them come here extremely challenged to us. Many come with only a 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade education in their own country.
Oh, really?
So 45% of the adult learners in our program do not even have a high school education in their own country.
Now, that is a startling fact. I would not have realized that people for whom English is a second language would not be literate
in their own language.
Yeah.
Yes, you're absolutely right. That's what we're seeing, and that's the trend of who's moving into DuPage County. Actually, are a lot of adults who are from other countries, but they don't even have command of their own language. And so they don't have the background that we do in education and even know how to learn. So our program is wonderful for adults like that because it's a one-on-one situation. So you build a relationship and you help that adult learner not just increase their English skills, but gain confidence in being able to go out and go shopping and speak and even talk to their next-door neighbors. Some of them are embarrassed to talk to their next-door neighbors because they're afraid they're going to mess up. So
and you also talked about the role of the mother in this and setting a good example for children.
Right. Well, I think as you know a little bit about our program, our vision is not just to literally change the lives of adult learners, but it's also to impact future generations. And I think that's one of the things that interested me most, having an elementary education background, is that we know that if we can help the parents, that will also help the children, so the parents are able to read to their children. And we know that if they're able to read to their children, then they can help them with their homework. And so many of the times, the adult learners that come to our program, that's one of their main goals. They want to be able to read to their children, help them with their homework, and they want to be able to participate in their children's school. They want to go to the PTO, PTA meetings. They want to go to the conferences and to understand what's going on. So it's very critical. And I think one of the most important things is that in our program, one of our main referral sources is Head Start. So last year, out of a little over, close to 600 actually students that were served in our program, close to 100 were referrals from the Head Start program. So we know we're getting to the young parents. As a matter of fact, the U.S. Department of Education says that the single most important predictor of a child's literacy rate is the literacy rate of the mother.
That is so interesting.
And if you think about it, it makes sense. The mothers are there with the children. And so we know if we can get to those young parents, it helps the children to start school with better English skills.
And yet there are so many more women who are working. I am surprised to learn that the mother is still that much more significant in this particular area than both parents or the husband. Interesting.
Well, I think the role, the role model is the mother. If you think about, I always think about this as sort of a funny little segue, but anytime you see someone and they want to thank someone, who do they thank? Many times they thank their mother. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for doing this. Not that they leave the fathers out by any means. And about 25% of our adult learners are men, but 75% are women.
And is that partly because women are more likely to ask for help or seek help in this and other areas, or
I think part
or they
of
need it more? Or
I think part of it is the population that we are reaching out to, and then the other part is probably that the women may have a little bit more time to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned that 100 referrals came from the Head Start program. Where did the other 400 come from? Because if they have trouble understanding English to begin with, unless they already have children whose grasp of the English language is good from attending school, who could tell them about it? How do they find out? They're not likely to be at the library reading notices. How do they find out?
Well, actually, they might not be reading the notices, but many times the adult learners do go to the libraries. And they may ask someone at the library, where can I get help with my English? And so we do get quite a few referrals from the libraries, and we do have a partnership with all the libraries in the county. And I mentioned earlier to you, Downers Grove Public Library is one of our most significant libraries. We always hold a tutor training there. We do a lot of in-service training, and a lot of tutoring takes place there. And so because of that, and because of who goes to the libraries, not only do they help us with the volunteers, but also adult learners. Another places we have partnerships with places like Family Shelter Service, DuPage Pads, names you're probably familiar with.
Right.
The county refers people to us. Sometimes it's just word of mouth.
And bookstores, it
And
seems,
bookstores, right.
would be another logical place, I would think.
Right, and we do try to keep our information in all the libraries, all the bookstores. But again, word of mouth also. You know, they may have a relative who's in our program who found out about us. So,
do we have any idea how much television impacts learning English for those for whom English is a second language?
you know, I don't know about here in the United States. I do know that broadly that many people who live in other countries, especially European countries, watch a lot of American TV, and they do learn a lot of English from TV. So some of the students who've come to our program that have a little, you know, some basic English skills, sometimes it is from television.
Okay, or reading comic books or the comics in the newspaper or something like that.
Well, another big
Interesting.
way would be songs. They listen to the
Songs.
music. Because American music is so popular.
Okay.
So they listen to American songs.
Okay, yeah, I was interested to discover driving along in Italy that the different channels on the car radio were all in English.
Right.
There must have been some that were in Italian, but it was all American pop music. Yeah.
English really is a language that is taught in many areas. But I'm still surprised